Hey friends, if you're excited to watch the super hit movie The Gorge, a 2025 American film in English, make sure to hit the like button. And if you're new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe and stay updated with all our latest content. In today's video, we're diving into all things about the movie. I'll be sharing all the important details about the film, what it's about, where you can watch it, and some fascinating facts you might not know. I'll also give you information on which platforms or satellite channels are streaming this movie, and we'll break down the technical side of things, including the music, pre-production, filming process, post-production, and budget. We'll even talk about the box office performance of El Inferno. Of course, we'll explore the movie's storyline in detail, share my thoughts with a mini-review, and discuss the star cast, the actors' performances, and the roles each character plays. So don't forget to watch the video all the way to the end for all the insights. Let's get started. The Gorge is a 2025 American science fiction romantic action horror film directed by Scott Derrickson and written by Zach Dean. It stars Miles Teller, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Sigourney Weaver. Teller and Taylor-Joy portray two elite snipers who are ordered to guard a deep gorge without knowing what lies inside. It was released on Apple TV Plus on February 14, 2025. Plot: two elite snipers receive identical missions. Travel to a secret location and guard the west and east sides of a deep gorge for 1 year without any contact with the outside world or their counterparts on the opposite sides. Levi Kane, a former U.S. Marine and current private contractor, agrees to guard the West Tower. Dresa, a Lithuanian covert operative frequently employed by the Kremlin, guards the east side. Upon arriving, Levi relieves his predecessor, JD, a British Royal Marine, of duty. JD explains that in addition to the towers, there are automated turret defenses, powerful cloaking antennas that hide the gorge, and mines on the walls of the gorge to contain the monstrous creatures within. Their predecessors nicknamed these creatures the Hollow Men, a reference to the poem of the same name by T.S. Eliot depicting the end of the world. JD tells Levi that 3 battalions of soldiers, 2,400 men, were sent into the gorge in the late 1940s but never returned. JD is exfiltrated by helicopter, but his contact executes him without explanation. After several weeks, Dresa violates the communication protocol on her birthday and initiates conversations with Levi via written signs. Levi reciprocates and the two engage in a sharpshooting competition. There is a protracted escape attempt by the Hollow Men, but Dresa and Levi defend their towers and each other. The two start communicating more frequently, playing games of chess, and making improvised drum sets. 6 months into their tour, Levi ziplines to the other side of the gorge to spend time with Dresa. The two court one another by dancing and making rabbit pie. Levi, an amateur poet, tells Dresa he is writing a poem for her entitled, "She Collapsed the Night." The next morning, Levi tells Dresa he loves her. He attempts to cross back to his side of the gorge, but the mines on the western side of the gorge detonate as the Hollow Men climb it, causing him to drop into the gorge when his zipline cable snaps. He deploys a parachute as he falls. Dresa parachutes in to rescue him, and the two discover that every plant, animal, and insect within the gorge has been cross-mutated with one another. Seeking shelter, they locate the source of the mutations, a bioweapons research lab abandoned after World War II when an earthquake caused a contaminant leak that produces symptoms of mutation within 5 days. Originally run by Eastern and Western governments, the facility has since become the responsibility of Darklake, a private defense corporation that periodically extracts samples and research data, hoping to create super soldiers. Levi discovers the Stray Dog Protocol, a failsafe developed by the original researchers to sterilize the site with a nuclear detonation, which Darklake now controls. The two find a jeep with a working towing cable and use it to climb back out of the gorge as they fight off the Hollow Men. They agree to separate for 5 days to ensure that neither is infected with the mutagens and to check in with their handlers. Levi's handler, Bartholomew, admits that Darklake is running the operation and that she knows the site has been compromised. Aware that Darklake is coming and will try to kill them, Dresa and Levi agree to activate the Stray Dog Protocol to protect the world from mutagens and mutagenic research. Bartholomew arrives with her soldiers and finds Levi's tower abandoned, They send armed aerial drones after Levi and Dresa, but the pair manage to destroy them. Executing pre-planned, simultaneous shots, the two destroy the cloak and expose the site to surveillance, triggering the stray dog protocol. Bartholomew and her soldiers are killed in the blast and the area is destroyed. Having been separated during the blast, Dresa completes her 5-day self-quarantine, but she believes Levi has died. She leaves for France, where the pair plan to reunite. Among her belongings, she finds an envelope from Levi to be opened if I don't make it. Inside she finds the completed poem, She Collapsed the Night. A month later, Dresa is working in a local restaurant. There Levi surprises her, asking if he can have rabbit pie. The two kiss. Cast. * Miles Teller as Levi Kane. * Anya Taylor-Joy as Dresa. * Sigourney Weaver as Bartholomew. * Soap Derisu as J.D. * William Houston as Ericus. Production. Zach Dean wrote a spec script for The Gorge that was later voted onto the blacklist of the most liked unproduced screenplays in 2020. In March 2022, Scott Derrickson was set to direct and produce the film alongside Skydance Media. In August, Miles Teller was cast to star, as well as serve as an executive producer. In October, Anya Taylor-Joy joined the cast, and Apple Original Films signed on. Sigourney Weaver was added to the cast in March 2023. The film includes a scene where the characters bond across the gorge, with the two playing chess and banging on improvised drum sets, recalling iconic breakout roles of the actors, as a chess prodigy in The Queen's Gambit for Taylor-Joy, and as a drummer in Whiplash for Teller. According to Teller and Taylor-Joy, the scenes were not written for them specifically, but were in the script prior to their being cast. They felt it was a bit on the nose considering their histories, and tried to get them changed, but Derrickson insisted the scene remain. Filming began in March 2023 in London, with production occurring at Warner Brothers Studios, Leavesden, where the tower interiors were built on a stage. The Rama River in Norway served as the location for the forest and gorge exteriors, while Llandudno in Wales stood it for ease in France. Release. The Gorge had its world premiere at the AMC Theaters at the Grove in Los Angeles on February 13, 2025, with the cast and crew in attendance. The film was subsequently released for streaming exclusively on Apple TV Plus on February 14, 2025. It became Apple TV Plus' biggest launch for a movie ever, surpassing WOLFS, starring George Clooney and Brad Pitt. Reception. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 64% of 112 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.9/10. The website's consensus reads, "Mixing multiple genres. The Gorge makes for a surprisingly endearing romance until its action-thriller obligations steer proceedings back onto a more predictable path." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 57 out of 100, based on 29 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Glenn Kenny of the New York Times gave The Gorge a positive review, saying, "The Gorge takes an already implausible premise and then catapults it out of the espionage genre and into science fiction and horror. This movie crackles most as a lively pas de deux between Taylor-Joy and Teller, who commendably take their material seriously no matter how seriously ridiculous it gets." Jack Coyle of the Associated Press gave the film 1.5 stars out of 4, calling it preposterous, arguing that the tonal swings between action and romance were not of high quality, with the movie feeling like an intriguing but empty genre mashup and streaming-only exercise. Coyle also took issue with the basic structure of the plot, arguing that, if some version of hell was pried open, would we, perhaps, want more than 2 guards? Scott Derrickson's The Gorge is a drive-in B-movie that most people will watch at home in the middle of winter. It's the new normal for movies that feel like they demand a massive screen and booming sound system to be watched at home. But there is something a little dispiriting about how differently this film would play with a crowd than it probably does on a phone. It's a throwback to goofy action movies that don't get made at this budget level that often anymore, a time when major studios would release an original flick about massive sandworms in the desert or Lo and Ice Cube fighting a giant snake. To that end, despite a clunky setup, The Gorge delivers on its potential. Just make sure you turn it up loud enough to annoy the neighbors. Levi, Miles Teller, and Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy, are elite snipers from different world powers who have been assigned to guard the titular location, a massive gorge in an undisclosed country. Derrickson and writer Zach Dean would have been smarter to drop us right into the middle of their assignment because the opening act of The Gorge is easily the weakest section of the film, giving us backstory for Levi and Dresa that we don't really need. The pair of performers are naturally charismatic enough for us to invest in their well-being without knowing about Levi's PTSD or Dresa's dying father before we meet them. It does allow Derrickson to give Sigourney Weaver a small role as Levi's superior and waste the excellent Soap Deraisu on an exposition dump of a role as the guy that Levi replaces. However, there's a two-hander version of this movie that's even better than what we get here. Deraisu's doomed soldier explains the assignment to Levi and the audience. Guard the gorge, not from outsiders but from what might come out of it. He explains his theory that the gorge is the door to hell, and their job is to keep watch over it, gunning down the creatures known as hollow men that emerge from within. There are numerous weapons and bombs rigged on the walls of the gorge and a counterpart on the other side. Levi's lucky enough that his partner in gorge guarding is the gorgeous Dresa, with whom he begins a courtship across the chasm. As Levi is stoic and strict in his routine, Dresa is the opposite, playful and lively. She starts her cross-gorge flirtations by playing Blitzkrieg Bop at top volume and challenging Levi to a shooting contest. Levi arguably drops his well-trained guard too quickly, but we have a movie to get to, clearly directed to give our pair a sort of opposites attract dynamic. Teller finds a sort of noble calm under pressure, while Taylor-Joy sketches a more free-spirited chaos agent. They lack a bit in the chemistry department, but they're such likable performers that they carry the script over a few of its shallow, patches. It's hard not to roll your eyes at lines like, "You bury enough secrets the graveyard runs out of room." But it's a testament to Teller and Taylor-Joy's likability that the dialogue doesn't sink the production. It almost adds a sort of quirky charm. After all, we don't come to B-movies for the poetry. Before you know it, the philosophical Levi has fallen in love with Dresa, and vice versa. And then the gorge really kicks into gear. Without spoiling anything, Derrickson's film becomes the one that it feels like he's most interested in, involving crazy set pieces and wicked creature design, all set to another phenomenal score from Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. The team behind the Challengers soundtrack, still maybe the biggest Oscar snub of the year, delivers another excellent score that elevates this film's action in a manner that shouldn't be underestimated. It's the fuel that really drives this action movie. And when it's driving, it's a blast. At its best, it recalls some of the anarchic horror action energy that made Sam Raimi a genre star in the 80s. An ironic inspiration given Raimi took over for Derrickson in the Doctor Strange franchise. There's a wonderfully chaotic sequence involving a jeep and waves of enemies that's so Raimi-esque that I expected Bruce Campbell to jump out and save the day. This is a compliment, by the way. We need more action that doesn't feel sanded down by CGI. And focus groups, stuff that feels honestly unhinged in a way that too few studios are willing to risk in the 2020s. The Gorge takes too long in its setup and rushes its ending in a manner that's unsatisfying. But when it's really humming during the initial flirtation and in the action-heavy midsection, it lives up to its genre-mashing potential. Dean's script takes elements of horror, action, sci-fi, and romance and puts them in a blender. The mixture may get a bit muddled at times, but it's still pretty satisfying in a way that the blockbusters that actually make it to theaters nowadays rarely are. In the movies, we've had green valleys, haunted hills, and grand canyons. But only now has the time arrived for a long-overshadowed land formation. The Gorge, a preposterous new video game-like thriller, at least succeeds in, gorging on this often overlooked geological feature. The gorge in question, to be fair, is a beauty. In some northern forested wilderness sit two concrete towers, one for each side of a wide, foggy ravine encircled by sheer rock steeps. Two expert snipers, Levi, Miles Teller, from the U.S., and Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy, placed by Russia, have been dropped off to man their respective stations. Both are conscripts of a sort. Levi has been a private contractor for the military since being psychologically deemed unfit for service by the Marines. Sigourney Weaver plays the cryptic woman who hires him. Dresa is Lithuanian. Each operates in the murky quasi-official world of covert military operations. All they know is that they're to be at this ultra-classified post for a year, part of an annual rotation. Their main job is to shoot anything that comes out of the chasm below. What's inside? The guy Levi is replacing thinks it could a portal to hell. The Gorge, directed by Scott Derrickson, Doctor Strange, The Black Phone, from a script by Zach Dean, The Tomorrow War, Fast X, unpeels these mysteries in a film that, if it wanted to, could be a very atmospheric post-Cold War parable, a kind of kaiju-in-the-ground thriller about deep-buried military secrets. That may be the backdrop, but The Gorge wants to be something else, too. It wants to be a love story. Taking after the hybrid DNA horrors that emerge from below, The Gorge mixes rom-com with sci-fi, with mostly ridiculous results. This is the rare movie to boast both horse-riding tree zombies, that's what I said, and so many T.S. Eliot references. There is good preposterous and bad preposterous. The Gorge, which I'm happy to report features the line, "The Gorge is exposed," may find some believers on both sides of that gulf. The production quality is well above the grade of its script, with cinematography by Dan Lawson, Guillermo del Toro's regular DP, and a score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, coming off their incredible 2024 of Challengers and Queer. The Gorge is the rare genre mashup where everything aligns perfectly to give us a big-budget, thrilling action-adventure. But the secret sauce is the chemistry between stars Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. Rarely do we get films that dare to mash up genres the way The Gorge does. Part action thriller, part sci-fi horror, part romance, all rolled up in a glossy package that recalls those films of the 80s and 90s that were constantly surprised with their twists and turns. The Scott Derrickson-directed film is rarer still, an original big-budget blockbuster that's not based on some existing IP or source material. Levi, Teller, and Dresa, Taylor-Joy, are government operatives each given a mysterious job: to man a guard tower on opposite sides of a mist-filled gorge. The rules are simple: protect the gorge and no contact with the other tower. It is only a matter of time until Levi and Dresa begin to communicate and form a bond, one that is stronger than rules. As rules are broken and the two are put into an extraordinary situation that will require both of their skill sets if they are to survive the unimaginable within the gorge. What may surprise many will be the romance and heat produced by leads Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. The Gorgious almost old-fashioned in its character-first approach to the event film. The first third of the film allows Teller and Taylor-Joy to play against one another, building a relationship without any dialogue. It's a conceit that works to Teller and Taylor-Joy's strengths as physical performers. It builds anticipation for their eventual close encounter. Once the eventual meeting happens, writer Zach Dean's script is smart enough to be the right kind of playful, giving the leads the room to play off one another. By the end of their night together, when everything goes to hell, and it does in spectacular fashion, there's an investment in their characters. The script does the almost old-fashioned task of character building and taking its time. It's almost a radical notion nowadays in the attention deficit-made films to allow stars to create and build characters we want to root for. The Gorge is the kind of love letter to sci-fi horror like The Thing and Silent Hill as it is of the kind of slick action thrillers Tony Scott made. Director Scott Derrickson is at his stylish best, delivering big action set pieces that thrill. Working with cinematographer Dan Lawson and editor Frederick Thorevel, Derrickson creates a film that, even though PG-13, feels every bit the harder-edge R-rated films of the 80s and 90s. When the second half of the film begins, Derrickson's knack for scares and tension comes out to play on a massive scale. Though not simply just about scares, Derrickson is playing with action set pieces that will surprise and delight even ardent action fans. The standout is a Jeep chase that will have any fan of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom grinning ear to ear. The Gorge is a throwback to the kind of pop filmmaking that we rarely get. One that isn't afraid to have something for everyone, though smart enough to put character first and take its time before the roller coaster ride. Reviews. Teller plays Levi, a former Marine sniper who 4 years earlier was diagnosed with PTSD and deemed unfit for service. Rather than fight it, a frustrated Levi retired and went to work as a military contractor. One evening, Levi receives a message summoning him to Camp Pendleton, where he meets with the high-ranking Bartholomew, Sigourney Weaver. She needs someone skilled, dependable, with no family attachments for a top-secret solo mission. Seeing it as a way of proving himself, Levi agrees. The military flies Levi to an undisclosed location in an undisclosed part of the world. His job is nearly as cryptic. He is to spend the next year manning a self-sufficient observation tower perched cliffside next to a giant gorge. He is to be a high-tech maintenance man, keeping the sensors, minigun emplacements, and cloakers up and running. He will have radio checks every 30 days, but otherwise there is to be no communication with the outside world. And just as important, contact with a similar tower sitting far away on the other side of the gorge is prohibited. After 1 year, his replacement will come and Levi can go home. Upon arriving, Levi is greeted by JD, wasThe, the soldier he's replacing, who gives him a tour of the tower. It stands high in the air, overlooking the massive gorge which is covered with a dense layer of fog that keeps anyone from seeing what lies below. JD then briefs Levi on details left out by the military, namely that the Allied governments have been secretly manning the tower since World War II, and that Levi's job isn't to keep people from entering the gorge. It's to stop what's in the gorge from coming out. Meanwhile, Taylor-Joy, a Lithuanian sniper working for the Russian government, is the new replacement in the East Tower on the other side of the gorge. Levi takes notice but sticks by his no-contact order, at least for a while. After a month of being alone with their thoughts, the two begin communicating with signs and high-powered binoculars. Suddenly, an unexpected relationship takes form. But then there's the gorge and the secrets it holds. It's crucial that you go into the film knowing as little as possible. So I'll just say that the movie's second half takes several unexpected turns. Some are action-packed while others veer ever so slightly into horror. The world-building also shifts with Derrickson, Dean D.P. Dan Lawson, and the talented visual effects team building something strikingly original, wildly creative, and utterly harrowing. Again, I know that's vague, but it should be. As for Teller and Taylor-Joy, they know their assignments and have a lot of fun fulfilling them. Admittedly, their dialogue can be a little hokey in spots, and their budding relationship is a bit rushed, leading to an abrupt character transformation in Levi that could have used more time. Still, they're both nice fits for their characters, which shows most once the action ramps up and Derrickson lets his creative vision run wild. The Gorge premieres February 14th on Apple TV+. Anya Taylor-Joy, is from Lithuania, and Levi Miles Teller is from the US. They are continuing a decade-long mission to protect the world from each side. Even during the Cold War, this mission continued because it works outside conventional political channels. Although they are not meant to communicate, they do need to work together. So Draka quickly ignores this rule and contacts Levi. As a result, they work together even better to protect each other and the rest of the world. The most wonderful cast. The two absolute stars are, of course, Miles Teller, Spiderhead, and Anya Taylor-Joy, the Menu. If these two didn't work, then the Gorge wouldn't work either. Fortunately, they deliver interesting individual characters and have good chemistry. Not just in a romantic sense, mind you. I loved how Dresa is at least as good a soldier as Levi. In fact, in ways, she's clearly bolder and better than him, something he also recognizes. In a world where it's the two of them against an unknown enemy, who wouldn't want the best possible partner at their side? Easter eggs in the Gorge. Notice the two activities Dresa and Levi engage in together. First, they're playing chess, then they're jamming on the drums. Anya Taylor-Joy was a chess genius in the Netflix series The Queen's Gambit. Miles Teller was a brilliant drummer in the award-winning movie Whiplash. The big boss sending Miles Teller's Levi on this mission is Sigourney Weaver, Alien, Ghostbusters. Also, we have wasThe, his house, Silent Night as JD, the man ending his year-long mission and introducing Levi to the job. He doesn't know much about the Gorge either. Oh, and for the record, once you, the viewer, are introduced to what's in the Gorge, how far would you go for a worthy love story? It's the most pressing question at the forefront of the Gorge, for its two main leads, rival snipers played with effortless chemistry by Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. Separated by thousands of meters of canyon depths, the vast gulf between them only exacerbates their need for connection. Yet, intentional or not, this also doubles as an inadvertent commentary on the state of the genre these days. It's no secret that 2024 was a fairly dire year when it comes to rom-coms. But no matter how many decision-makers in charge want to pretend otherwise, audiences clearly remain starved for something that delivers romance. As much as filmmakers might want to make straightforward romances, however, they've had far better luck sneaking them into larger genre plays. Think of Twisters, using the backdrop of CGI tornadoes to do an enemies-to-lovers ship, even if it neglected to include that all-important kiss at the end, or, more recently, Heart Eyes, taking the slasher route to its rom-com ambitions. The Gorge pulls off this balance better than most of its contemporaries, albeit not quite to its fullest potential. Scott Derrickson's latest, from a 2020 Black List screenplay by Zach Dean, The Tomorrow War, is best described as a genre mashup. The Doctor Strange and the Black Phone director is working in ideal territory here, and he knows it, having already dabbled in high-flying action with his brief stay in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and obviously proving his horror bona fides several times over by now. The Gorge initially falls under the heading of a slow-burning action thriller, following the parallel journeys of Lone Wolf, PTSD-ridden snipers Levi, Teller, and his Lithuanian counterpart Dresa, Taylor-Joy, as they're ordered to guard opposite sides of a mysterious gorge. It soon transforms into something altogether more romantic when, with little else to do beyond their daily patrols, Levi and Dresa can't resist keeping a voyeuristic eye on one another through their high-tech binoculars. Once they tumble down into the darkest recesses of Chekhov's Gorge itself, which, trust me, is only a spoiler for anyone who's never watched a single movie before, things take a turn into outright sci-fi territory. While watching The Gorge, I couldn't help but think about what best defines a movie star. Does that phrase even mean much anymore when an original like this, an ideal date night movie, in which Valentine's Day plays a surprising role in the plot, buoyed by little more than a nifty premise and two undeniably talented performers, is doomed to a straight-to-streaming fate? Whatever the case may be, at least the filmmakers know and take full advantage of its strengths. Right from the outset, cinematographer Dan Lawson, Crimson Peak, The Shape of Water, John Wick, Chapter 4. Just can't get enough of Anya Taylor-Joy's expressive face through framing and lighting, brandishing it like a weapon as deadly and effective as any of the actual ones she uses to lethal effect. Meanwhile, world-weary exhaustion drips off Miles Teller's unshaven face and the slumping set of his shoulders. Much of the first hour or so, which takes as patient an approach as I've ever seen in this age of streaming, unfolds with a minimum of dialogue and simply allows its two leads to act. Derrickson certainly doesn't make things easy for himself, forced to dramatize profound yearning through little more than sniper scopes and hastily scrawled messages. But it's no coincidence that Teller and Taylor-Joy, two stars uniquely capable of communicating so much with their eyes and body language alone, are more than up to the task and practically melt the screen with their sizzling chemistry. The Gorge introduces us to Taylor-Joy's Dresa and Teller's Levi as killers with a conscience, though each sniper handles their own doubts and inner turmoil in very different ways. Under the employ of Moscow, the haunted Dresa wrestles with guilt after every expert pull of the trigger and has nobody but her ailing father, William Houston, in a brief but sweet appearance, to whom she can unburden herself. Levi, meanwhile, is an ex-Marine whose unparalleled work as a mercenary private contractor concludes prematurely at the hands of a psychiatrist report deeming him unfit for service. Suffering from extreme burnout, his only recourse comes from sleepless nights spent boozing or writing scraps of poetry in his journal. Why recruit someone as broken as this into his most dangerous mission yet? In a great bit of casting, Sigourney Weaver taps into her inner bureaucratic monster as shadowy op leader Bartholomew, showcasing a ruthlessness that would impress Paul Reiser's company man Burke from Aliens. In an early interview, her surgically precise questions reveal he lacks any emotional attachments whatsoever. Movie reviews. The Gorge Review. An Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller romance wrapped in sci-fi pulp. Apple TV+. By Jeremy Mathayfeb. 2025, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How far would you go for a worthy love story? It's the most pressing question at the forefront of The Gorge, for its two main leads, rival snipers played with effortless chemistry by Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. Separated by thousands of meters of canyon depths, the vast gulf between them only exacerbates their need for connection. Yet, intentional or not, This also doubles as an inadvertent commentary on the state of the genre these days. It's no secret that 2024 was a fairly dire year when it comes to rom-coms. But no matter how many decision-makers in charge want to pretend otherwise, audiences clearly remain starved for something that delivers romance. As much as filmmakers might want to make straightforward romances, however, they've had far better luck sneaking them into larger genre plays. Think of Twisters, using the backdrop of CGI tornadoes to do an enemies-to-lovers ship, even if it neglected to include that all-important kiss at the end, or, more recently, Heart Eyes, taking the slasher route to its rom-com ambitions. The Gorge pulls off this balance better than most of its contemporaries, albeit not quite to its fullest potential. Scott Derrickson's latest, from a 2020 Blacklist screenplay by Zach Dean, The Tomorrow War, is best described as a genre mashup. The Doctor Strange and the Black Phone director is working in ideal territory here, and he knows it, having already dabbled in high-flying action with his brief stay in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and obviously proving his horror bona fides several times over by now. The Gorge initially falls under the heading of a slow-burning action thriller, following the parallel journeys of Lone Wolf, PTSD-ridden snipers Levi, Teller, and his Lithuanian counterpart Dresa, Taylor-Joy, as they're ordered to guard opposite sides of a mysterious gorge. It soon transforms into something altogether more romantic when, with little else to do beyond their daily patrols, Levi and Dresa can't resist keeping a voyeuristic eye on one another through their high-tech binoculars. Once they tumble down into the darkest recesses of Chekhov's Gorge itself, which, trust me, is only a spoiler for anyone who's never watched a single movie before, things take a turn into outright sci-fi territory. The Gorge is a movie that's constantly light on its feet, flipping between tones and genres with deceptive ease. Derrickson has never met a premise he couldn't somehow flip on its head, and his confident direction makes this a blast to watch unfold. You'll come for the promise of pulpy sci-fi action with a dash of horror, which the movie only occasionally delivers on. But you'll end up staying for the achingly sincere love story, one that's, by far, the highlight of the film. Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller's chemistry in The Gorge melts the screen. Apple TV+. While watching The Gorge, I couldn't help but think about what best defines a movie star. Does that phrase even mean much anymore when an original like this, an ideal date-night movie, in which Valentine's Day plays a surprising role in the plot, buoyed by little more than a nifty premise and two undeniably talented performers, is doomed to a straight-to-streaming fate? Whatever the case may be, at least the filmmakers know and take full advantage of its strengths. Right from the outset, cinematographer Dan Lawson, Crimson Peak, The Shape of Water, John Wick, Chapter 4. Just can't get enough of Anya Taylor-Joy's expressive face through framing and lighting, brandishing it like a weapon as deadly and effective as any of the actual ones she uses to lethal effect. Meanwhile, world-weary exhaustion drips off Miles Teller's unshaven face and the slumping set of his shoulders. Much of the first hour or so, which takes as patient an approach as I've ever seen in this age of streaming, unfolds with a minimum of dialogue and simply allows its two leads to act. Derrickson certainly doesn't make things easy for himself, forced to dramatize profound yearning through little more than sniper scopes and hastily scrawled messages. But it's no coincidence that Teller and Taylor-Joy, two stars uniquely capable of communicating so much with their eyes and body language alone, are more than up to the task and practically melt the screen with their sizzling chemistry. The Gorge introduces us to Taylor-Joy's Dresa and Teller's Levi as killers with a conscience, though each sniper handles their own doubts and inner turmoil in very different ways. Under the employ of Moscow, the haunted Dresa wrestles with guilt after every expert pull of the trigger and has nobody but her ailing father, William Houston, in a brief but sweet appearance, to whom she can unburden herself. Levi, meanwhile, is an ex-Marine whose unparalleled work as a mercenary private contractor concludes prematurely at the hands of a psychiatrist report deeming him unfit for service. Suffering from extreme burnout, his only recourse comes from sleepless nights spent boozing or writing scraps of poetry in his journal. Why recruit someone as broken as this into his most dangerous mission yet? In a great bit of casting, Sigourney Weaver taps into her inner bureaucratic monster as shadowy op leader Bartholomew, showcasing a ruthlessness that would impress Paul Reiser's company man Burke from Aliens. In an early interview, her surgically precise questions reveal he lacks any emotional attachments whatsoever. Taken together, Dresa and Levi couldn't possibly be more well-suited for the thankless, year-long assignment in the middle of nowhere. Neither relish their abject loneliness, but both are at least better equipped to deal with it than anyone else. Or so they think. After taking the bold step of making contact with each other through handwritten signs from across the gorge, this protocol-breaking act soon gives way to long-distance chess matches, childish pranks, and straight-up flirting, oftentimes conveyed through showing off their sniper skills which, in the process, puts a whole new twist on shooting your shot. Thanks to this unique alchemy of tones and genres, the individual pieces of the gorge add up to something greater, even if the pulpier sci-fi elements in the second half can't fully live up to the promise of the first. When Derrickson and Dean inevitably switch gears once again and plunge us headfirst into the shadowy abyss, viewers have only a bare inkling of what awaits our two lovesick heroes. When Dresa and Levi first arrive, the little intel they receive involves some vague explanation about keeping creatures known as hollow men, a term taken straight out of a T.S. Eliot poem, as Levi observes, that plays a large thematic role in the script, from escaping the canyon. A cleverly staged action sequence in the early going gives us a glimpse of these gnarly-looking monsters and the threat they pose as they attempt to scale the walls, though the scene's primary purpose is to bring Dresa and Levi closer together. Once stripped of their high-tech gadgetry and the safety of their watchtowers, the gorge turns into an odyssey into the unknown. It's hard to classify which genre director Scott Derrickson's The Gorge neatly slots into, given that it seamlessly switches between romance, action, horror, and political thriller with harmonious purpose. It follows Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Levi, Miles Teller, elite snipers tasked with standing guard at opposites over a gorge that contains unknown horrors. The two are strictly forbidden from interacting with each other, with the overseer of operations of the gorge, Bartholomew, Sigourney Weaver, commanding Levi to stay focused on the task at hand. The film takes its time to reveal exactly what lies beneath, focusing instead on how Dresa and Levi go from coworkers to lovers. Armed with nothing more than an endless supply of alcohol to drink away their boredom and a copious stockpile of weapons, it's touching to see them use these materials, from setting up targets for the others to shoot or by turning their pots and pans into drum sets and having a Christmas Carol jam session, to try and forge a connection with each other. Their relationship is what anchors the film once it shifts into its more horrific elements. For Derrickson, the chance to tell a story that oscillates between moments of love and terror represents the perfect distillation of his own philosophy regarding how people change in relationship and community. Both love and suffering are the two main things that make us change. They can make us look deeper at ourselves and see what's going on, and hopefully do something about it and improve and grow as a person, which I believe is why we exist on the earth in the first place, he shared. Derrickson spoke with RogerEbert.com at the Peninsula Hotel in Chicago about why he's pivoting to happy endings, parallels between the ecological fallout of the Rocky Flats power plant and the horrors of the gorge, how the central romance grounds the film as it shifts genres, and why The Gorge is a perfect drive-in movie. This conversation has been edited and condensed for clarity. This interview contains mild spoilers for The Gorge. You've shared that what made you ultimately sign off on directing this movie was also the thing that made you pass on it in the first place, namely that The Gorge can't be pinned down to any one genre. It's a blend of romance, horror, sci-fi, and political thriller. Can you talk about how you harmoniously balanced those elements? I thought that screenwriter Zach's script effortlessly harmonized those genres, particularly in the film's second half when it moves from science fiction and action to suspense and then to political thriller. The fun challenge of the movie was to build the romance in the beginning and not lose sight of that in the presence of all these other genres when they come blasting in one after another. It came down to being very meticulous about how this couple would look out for each other, touch each other during the action scenes, and work as a team. There are some enchanting bits of dialogue, but their love is mainly kept alive by how they watch over each other under duress. I think that's very romantic. They have to communicate so much without words, and it turns into a bit of a silent film in the beginning during their meet-cute montage from across the gorge. I could have seen a whole movie of these characters trying to get to know each other, To me, at least, there are some pointed references to Miles and Anya's past work, like when they play chess or when they have a jam session with makeshift drums. Were those intentional? Laughs. I swear on the life of my kids that was in the script before we ever cast them. Then, when we ended up casting Anya and Miles, it hit me and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? Am I going to cut this out? But then I thought, you know what, it's great and it'll be funny, and I'm not going to get rid of this just because of their past movies. I thought it was interesting that you cast Sigourney Weaver in a role where now she's the bureaucratic and somewhat unfeeling leader who deploys unknowing agents to monstrous horrors like in Aliens. I will say, though, unlike Paul Reiser's character in that film, who is truly evil, one of the reasons I think Sigourney did this was because when she talked to me, I said, I don't think Bartholomew is a villain. She's an antagonist who believes in what she's doing, but has moral clarity regarding her point of view. I think that she's wrong, but Bartholomew needed to be played as though she doesn't like the fact that she has to kill off soldiers after they do their gorge rotations, but in her mind, that's collateral damage for a higher purpose, which is what the masters of war do. I know the audience will not feel empathy towards her, but knowing her character would not be played as an archvillain was one of the reasons Sigourney was open to playing her. The fight scene atop the Willis MB Jeep that's getting scaled up the mountain is a standout action sequence, and I know it is one of the creative decisions that you incorporated when you boarded this project. I'm curious about what other action sequences changed, or you touched up once you came on board, and how you might have used the new Cyclops augmented reality system. Author's note: this technology helps creators visualize computer-generated elements in real time as they might appear in the finished film. The Cyclops technology was all for Above the Gorge. We used that to build the digital stitching of photography from Norway to construct the actual gorge out of real photography. What we did down in the gorge, though, was where my writing partner, C. Robert Cargill, and I did a lot of innovation to keep the action moving and interesting. We rewrote the whole mythology of the gorge. The DNA hybrid origins were all us. The skull spiders were there in some form in the original script, but I also thought that the film needed a truly horrific scene. That's when I came up with the bridge scene and what I call the body web. As I was writing it, the idea was that there is a DNA hybrid for something organically grown from both human and plant DNA. It's not assimilated bodies. It's something that's growing on its own now. I looked at that and thought, well, you're messing with God now when you're doing things, and things like that are the result. There's something unholy about it, which is scary. There needed to be an escalation so that each time you saw something, it was something new and interesting, and hopefully some things you hadn't seen before. I'm sure you're no stranger to seeing the horrific fallout of biochemical monstrosities. Having grown up in Westminster, Colorado, especially given that the Rocky Flats plant isn't that far away. I technically was in the Shaw Heights area, but you're right. I saw our dog give birth to mutated puppies when I was a little kid because of the Rocky Flats. That happened to all the animals that were in any place that was downwind of Rocky Flats. I saw a lot of weird violence and some grotesque, disturbing things. That certainly impacted my thinking and approach as I worked on this. I still follow research and investigative reporting for what goes on in that area because it's a big part of my history and has impacted my life. There was a book called Full Body Burden: Growing Up in the Nuclear Shadow of Rocky Flats by Kristen Iverson that I optioned and am still trying to turn into a TV show. It's about the process of outing Rockwell International and what they were doing to the community and being indemnified by the government. It was horrible. If you get to make it, that project would certainly make for an interesting companion piece with The Gorge. That's part of the interest and what intrigued me about this script, too. This idea that corporate greed, power, and ambition can blend with the government and manipulate and utilize it to do things that are unethical for profit, all under the name of defense protection. I mean, that's the Gorge. That's Rocky Flats. I loved the incorporation of the church pews down in the gorge, but as a whole, I found the film to be an interesting encapsulation of what it's like to move out of a sort of fundamentalist indoctrination into a kind of enlightenment, faith, and even love that's more lasting. The arc of Levi's and Drace's stories is that of going from a sort of blind trust to disillusionment to something more hopeful. The spirituality of the movie, for me, isn't specifically religious as much as it has to do with trauma and suffering. When both Levi and Drace fall into the gorge, what they discover, particularly the life-threatening, dangerous, and violent experiences, dislodge them from themselves and allow them to see each other in ways they weren't able to before. Love and suffering are the two main things that make us change. They can make us look deeper at ourselves and see what's going on, and hopefully do something about it and improve and grow as a person, which I believe is why we exist on the earth in the first place. If there's a spiritual quality to the movie, it's about that. It's about the hidden, angry truth that wants to get out and how love and pain facilitate that liberation. It's back to this idea of perfect love casts out fear. I think of when Drace's father touchingly tells her, "Give me your shame." Levi didn't have a confessor. He didn't have a priest. He didn't have a father like she did. He held all of his guilt and shame inside and compartmentalized the complexity of what he did for a living. Miles and I worked on this together, but he was the one who came up with that line. When you bury enough bodies, the graveyard runs out of room. I love that because, as a character, Levi becomes aware that he can't keep things inside anymore. He knows he's breaking down. Secrets that are buried get angry. They want to come out, and if you don't let them out, they manifest in weird ways. The healthy release is through love and safety, but also, a lot of times, it takes a trauma, it takes a tragedy, it takes some suffering to make us deal with ourselves. Most people I know, myself included, that's the story of our lives. We look back, and we see the way that we have suffered and grown, and that is sort of the defining narrative of who we are. Can anybody reflect on their lives and not define their growth through suffering or love? Back to the church at the bottom of hell, I love this idea that the hollow men had a space for confession and processing through the ways suffering and love might have shaped them. There are still those spaces in the Gorge. I thought the genius of having the church there was the fact that all these people went in there and killed themselves rather than become one of these hybrid monstrosities. There's something diabolical about what they witnessed, and living faithfully for these church folks meant death. I love Eliot's poetry and essays. He was one of those figures in modernism who was a voice for the anxiety and despair that defined that modernist, creative aesthetic similar to Flannery O'Connor, who had this uncompromising Christian imagination. In Eliot's work, there was something bleak but also hopeful that I thought was appropriate for this movie. To your point about articulating anxieties, Eliot and O'Connor's writing touched a lot on these themes of mystery and what it means to try and grasp a hold of something we may not know or understand. On a simpler, less lofty level, a line in the script that Soap Derisu's JD character says is, "The Gorge is the door to hell, and we're standing guard at the gate." I remember reading that and being like, oh, I'm in. I want to know what's down there. But then the story makes you wait. You don't go down to the Gorge for another 35 or 40 pages. But that mystery is lurking. That's why my team and I did so much work rewriting and doing visual design for the Gorge, because I knew that when we went, if I created that promise in the movie and the audience felt the way I felt reading the script, then when we get down there, they better be satisfied with what they see. They better see some shit they haven't seen before. It's not just a zombie movie down there. I think when I saw the undead horses barrel through, I was like, oh, I have no idea what comes next. We're talking about really lofty shit, but at the same time, I think that The Gorge is a drive-in movie. It's zany and outrageous. We throw skull spiders at people, and there's hollow men on horseback, and there's a web of bodies and plants covering a bridge. I think it's really fun. I do think the film has its soul, purpose, and themes, and I hope also that it's just a good time. It makes it all the more fitting that Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross scored this, and they could bring in their punk rock sensibilities. My favorite piece of music they made is when Levi and Drace are walking through what my team and I called the Bone Tree Wasteland, where we see the trees with oversized skeletal parts. That piece of music is just sublime. It was the first piece of music they gave me for the movie. They often did a sort of industrial, punk and powerful pulsating tone for the action scenes as if to communicate, hey man, we're here to have a good time. The original cut of that song was 23 minutes long, but I think that scene is only 8 seconds of the movie, laughs. Seeing those characters walking through the violet bone tree wasteland is not only my favorite visual beat in the movie, but because of the score, it's probably my favorite sonic beat of the movie. There's a lot to see there, even if it doesn't last for long. You usually don't do happy endings for your films. But lately, with projects like The Black Phone and now The Gorge, despite their heaviness, they end a bit more hopefully. Is this a conscious shift in trend for your work? It's because of my wife, Maggie Levin. I'm a much happier person. I'm not interested in the same kind of bleak, hopeless endings that I was before. So you're saying that The Black Phone 2 will end with a happily ever after? Laughs. I'm not gonna go that far. I also made that film, Dreamkill, for V/H/S/85. If you want a bleak ending, watch that. That's probably the sickest thing I've done. In an interview with RogerEbert.com writer Walter Chaw, you shared, "Every film I've made has been a process of excavating a chunk of the anxiety and fear that I carry. I'm curious. What fear is being excavated for you with The Gorge? I want to believe that love and traumatic suffering can make you a better and freer person. This feeling of falling in love and becoming entrusted to another person in such a way that both people can divulge who they are and share secrets they may not have been able to do before. There's fear of losing that. The chance to explore these ideas is what made this movie, along with the chance to explore the bizarre genre hybrid stuff, inescapable for me." In The Gorge, two professional agents who are placed on opposite sides of a strange abyss are enemies at first, and then become reluctant allies as the story's evil manifests. Their arduous voyage challenges them emotionally and physically as they try to protect people from various unveiled threats. That fact these two protagonists are worlds apart and have to be together is the drive of the whole show, and it's exciting to watch the fight for survival and their passion for each other being painted with shades of tension and suspense. The key themes of The Gorge include love, sacrifice, and survival, interweaving the pure interpersonal connection that is love to spectacular ringing crusader epics of the whole world. It creates a true narrative of fortitude predicament, which is nothing short of touching and thrilling. It is established and expertly shifts from one key to another, from full-throttle action to sweet emotion, keeping the viewers engaged in the mystery and romance the story offers. The cast of The Gorge is perfect, with all the actors giving their best to give life to the show's characters. Both Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller excel at depicting the rather intricate process of the given characters' relationships shift from bitter rivals to trusted companions. Sigourney Weaver and Soap Derisu also do well in their roles, giving a good performance to the film's overall feel. The characters are well written, while the character arcs are captivating, making it easy for the audience to relate to the characters on the screen. The Gorge's director, Scott Derrickson, does a good job of mixing belonging to different genres, making visually rich and engaging movies. Despite his task to create B-movie horror, Derrickson skillfully weaves scenes of tension and scenes full of emotions into the film while keeping the viewer involved not only intellectually but even physiologically. This fact reveals that he managed to balance the action and romance moments, and all in one film without being distracted by this weakness. The film has the right music that plays in the background and creates an atmosphere in different scenes, either for tension or emotion. It is integrated with cinematography where important scenes are more intense, and it reveals the transition of emotional stage of the protagonists. It builds most notably in key scenes, serving as a constant narrative of what is at stake for characters within the story. The director of The Gorge, John Doe, uses visuals quite effectively, especially with The Gorge, which is presented as breathtaking as well as terrifying in its moment. Lighting adds to the suspense of the film, and new camera work adds dimension to the action scenes. The cinematic formation allows the audience to join the characters living their seemingly lonely yet vast lives. The aesthetic of the show becomes ornamental to the matter's themes. The architecture of The Gorge is deliberately designed to create a dreamlike yet tangible reality of the character's experience. The Gorge here is as malevolent a character as any and well imagined, not to mention the detail with which Georgeson renders it. Even the word-of-film style isolated posts of the operatives suggests loneliness and stamina, which enhances character conflict. In The Gorge, special effect is used in a very artistic and conservative way, but is highly spectacular as well. The inhabitants of The Gorge are made into a believable threat from the mystery within them, which is both immediate and mysterious. These effects work closely with practical shots and do not dominate the screen while adding higher stakes to the movie. The cinematography by Jane Doe contributes to the suspense and the continuity of the movie by providing rational pace and atmosphere for uninterrupted watching. Where some action scenes are edited with rapidity to heighten tension, slow moments are given room to breathe. Thus, dramatic sequences are very powerful. The timing of The Gorge is very effective, whereby often shoot-'em-up sequences are edited fast to give powerful tension where steady-paced drama gives room for impact. This constant movement keeps the audience engaged and at the same time allowing enough space to invest in the main characters' arcs. Conversational flow of The Gorge is well defined with great dialogues that not only add depth to the characters and developments of their histories, but also advance the plot. The dialogues that are shared between the two lead characters are memorable as well since they show the other side of the characters and their reasons for doing what they do. Again, in the script for the movie The Gorge, tension-filled dialogues are provided, as are moments of introspection and melancholy. However, some people may be disappointed with the plot of the movie The Gorge, as it gives some familiar shades of the traditional sci-fi and action movies. These conventions make sense only after watching the film because its distinctive approach results from first-class acting and directing. Some temporary slowing down in the middle part does not affect the overall effectiveness of the story. The Gorge is a bright science fiction action with proper doses of romance, rich in interesting acting turns and stellar stunts. It is very full on emotionally and stimulating to all the senses, and therefore an unforgettable journey through a film. From the various aspects and plot of the story, and the themes of strength and of love, the audience is left with deep thoughts after watching this film. Black Phone's Scott Derrickson conjures up tense mystery action thrills, and a surprisingly solid alternative Valentine's Day choice with this unexpectedly decent streaming gem. Derrickson seldom drifted too far from his horror wheelhouse, dabbling in blockbuster sci-fi with his 2008 remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and then again with blockbuster superhero work for the MCU with 2016's Doctor Strange, but still lacing them both with his more mysterious, horror-twinged sensibilities. Those same tendencies that brought us The Sinisters and The Black Phones. Yes, there's a sequel coming up this year. The Gorge seems like a better middle ground fit for Derrickson than all-out Hollywood blockbuster, as anybody who has, unfortunately, seen the trailer probably already knows. If you haven't, then it's probably worth seeing this one blind, but considering even some of the posters give away key secrets, that's probably a tall order, although this spoiler-free review will do its best to skirt around the mystery. Levi and Dresa are elite snipers, contractors for the West and the East, respectively, whose latest assignment is an unusual one, to spend a year in a secluded facility, the exact geographical placement of which they don't even know, as something akin to gatekeepers, watching over a perimeter wall via huge towers on opposite sides of a huge, mist-enshrouded gorge. They don't know who they're guarding against, and are merely under instructions to renew the auto turrets, maintain the minefield, and ensure they have zero contact with one another. Of course, 12 months of seeming nothingness is a hard ask, even for snipers experienced in extended periods of still patience, and Dresa soon wears down Levi's resolve, finding ways to broach the distance between each other with notepads and binoculars, but soon craving more proximate contact. The Gorge runs at over 2 hours in length, and it's safe to say that they invest a large quantity of this in developing the burgeoning relationship with these two long-distance warriors. And, frustrating as this might seem on paper, it actually pays off. Teller and Taylor-Joy, at times pleasantly channeling pure Furiosa, have excellent chemistry, committing to the two-handed isolation of the piece with aplomb, sparking up some heat with their very literal long-distance relatio. So, this sad sack is offered a year's assignment to guard a gorge located 500 miles from nowhere. Where do I sign up? He will guard the West Rim and a Rusky guards the East. It's the gate to hell, as we are informed. It seems the contents of the Gorge is the American/Russian project, a Cold War deal for the protection of you, the American public. We meet Dresa in her sniper's nest, where she shoots at long distance some poor slob with a wife and 4 kids. As he walks off a plane, remaining on the stop step just long enough for Dresa blow his brains out, with an Accuracy International AXMC rifle, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. What can I say? I'm a gun nut. Which reminds me, both Dresa and Levi are armed with assault rifles, the type with 30-round magazines that hold 500 rounds. We are told Dresa is Lithuanian serving the Russians. I've known a few Lithuanians, and they were not known to sing Gosударственный гимн SSSR or Gosударственный гимн Российской Федерации, and you may think the Star-Spangled Banner is hard to sing. I knew Simon Kudurka pretty well, and he really hated Russians. See The Defection of Simon Kudurka, 1978 TV movie. He was Lithuanian. The way he told it, the KGB was like something out of a Stephen King story. So where was I? Yeah, Levi is flown within 38 kicks of the gorge. He must parachute in and hoof it, climbing up dangerous cliff faces and other such endurances all the way to his new job. The gorge is in a no-fly zone, it seems, requiring the delay in the story. Bear in mind, the gorge is under perpetual fog, so you can't see jack shit. Anyway, Dresa gets the duty on the East Rim. Cut to the chase. Dresa and Levi meet cute after repelling a zombie assault from Gorge Way, and things just get cuter as the relationship goes on. The relationship? Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy have all the on-screen chemistry of two stray bulldogs. It's what you get when they cast a film based on looks alone. Anya Taylor-Joy really tries, rolling her eyes demurely and looking girlish, but Christ, Teller is just not on her wavelength. The gorge and what's in it? What you'd expect from a hack. Zach Dean. He was responsible for the silly monstrosity Tomorrow War. Clearly not a student of writers like Ben Hecht, William Golden, or Robert Towne. He just throws in the kitchen sink and waits to see who might stumble over the mess. The bottom of the gorge contains elements of work of H.P. Lovecraft, King's Jerusalem's Lot, Michael Crichton, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the big bug-filled grotto on Skull Island in King Kong, the Headless Horseman, with Horse, Zombie Division, a river to ensure the must-talked-about infection will spread, a church, a bunker where we see a 35mm filmed confession by a bad old scientist. Anyone educated past 3rd grade is a baddie in this sort of drivel, and a computer with internet access, a generator to apply juice at the touch of a button, a big dose of the Night of the Living Dead, mutated version. Keep in mind, no one has been into the gorge since the end of World War II. The plucky duo end up at the gorge bottom and learn the ugly truth. The entire mess is an experiment run by Sigourney for the benefit of the bad corporation, Blacklake, Reed, the real-life former private army, Blackwater, to create a super soldier, right out of the X-Files. Of course, those two crazy, lovable kids shoot their way out and see to it Sigourney and her myrmidons all die. As contract killers, they are morally superior to Blacklake because they have fallen in love, and love, as you know, conquers all. The end is stolen right out of the last scene of The Bourne Identity. Anything probable? Not likely. I doubt the James Webb Space Telescope could detect a single original idea in the pathetic excuse for a movie. Any reviewer giving it a good notice should be sentenced to 10 years in the borax mines of Death Valley. Zach Dean deserves life with no internet access. Apple TV Plus may not have been birthed from the COVID-19 pandemic, arriving on our home screens mere months prior at the tail end of 2019, but like its family-oriented counterpart Disney Plus, the streamer's rise came in tandem with a moment perfectly, albeit morbidly, suited to clients remaining planted in one place with nowhere else to go. Perhaps not striking while the iron is hot, the tech giant turned film studio has finally decided in 2025 to marry its initial ambitions for blockbuster fare with the very ambience of isolation that put a damper on those plans when theatrical viewing was still part of their primary business plan. The Gorge, arriving straight to the streamer just in time for the season of manufactured love, makes prominent use of protracted longing when there are no other options to be found but the one, staring you in the face. At the same time, director Scott Derrickson and screenwriter Zach Dean dive into this cavern headfirst with the inclination to make the synthetic attraction between its subjects blossom into something more organic. In that sense, the film becomes a perfect confluence of chemical engineering, from our recently strengthened weariness towards isolation to our growing hunger for star-driven action/romance entertainment, that comes together as harmoniously as any one of the decrepit beings that lie deep in the valley that separates our star-crossed strangers. Those beings are colloquially referred to as hollow men, a play off the title of a T.S. Eliot poem. Don't worry if you forget that, for the film will be quick to remind you, and nobody tasked with guarding the posts knows precisely what they are or what they're doing at the bottom of the titular gorge. All our two assigned mercenaries are told by the superiors who placed them in this remote locale that they are to remain posted on their respective ends of the mysterious canyon, forbidden from contacting one another, and contain it in the event that any hollow men feel the inclination to ascend. The star-crossed strangers meant to keep to themselves are American ex-Marine Levi, Miles Teller, and Lithuanian contract killer Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy, whose accent flip-flops between vaguely fake Russian and straight-up American. Things go as planned for roughly 6 months before Dresa begins to feel the slow sting of solitude, even if we never do, but more on that in a second, and begins corresponding with her counterpart via cutesy, "You belong with me"-esque signage. One thing leads to another, and a taboo interaction leads to a taboo crossing into the deadly gorge. This isn't a spoiler. It's both in the trailer and is pretty much the only direction in which a film of this type can move. From here, the gorge essentially spends a large chunk of its latter half acting as a prolonged version of that one insect-laden ravine scene from Peter Jackson's King Kong. It's in this area that Derrickson's direction, his past as a primarily horror-driven filmmaker, best serves the film, as the biologically skewed world of the Hollow Men lends itself decently to some goosebump-inducing imagery whenever the shiny fog surrounding it gives way. One particular scene involving what amounts to a giant Venus flytrap is especially primed to make the hairs on your neck stand at attention. This is, of course, whenever Derrickson actually manages to overcome the overproduced polish of the film's home-ready appearance. Any scene taking place above the gorge looks like a desktop screensaver, and any scene below looks like a live-action reimagining of the film's visuals are really only the second or third issue, though for The Gorge, in its attempts to harness the isolation of its setting, completely fails to let itself simmer in any meaningful way to give its subsequent romance a real sense of flavor. Whatever baggage Dresa is carrying along for this year-long mission, Dean's script and Derrickson's pacing make no effort to create the sense that anything more than the real-time length of 30 minutes has passed before these two start making googly eyes that we're meant to believe have been stirring for months. Jones, if the host body was that of a flu-ridden Snoop Dogg. Ignoring the fact that Taylor-Joy's continued propensity for kicking ass doesn't distract from her character's every decision, indicating that she should be the last person any organization picks for such a task. Teller, for all his white-bread stoicism, at least fits the profile of an expendable soldier with nothing ahead but the next job. Derrickson simply fails to make any of his chosen beats hit with the impact of a sniper's perfectly aimed bullet. Too rushed and standardized to find the fundamental force that can pull two strangers together, or even, in a stars at noon sense, the entirely surface-level force that can pull two horny people together in spite of the fact that they have no chemistry beyond the thirst for any readily available bodies. The gorge is so concentrated on exploring the depths of its well-worn canyon that it never realizes it's looking in the wrong crevices altogether. These glorified bouncers may wish the gorge was empty, but Derrickson could have benefited from the presence of something more to fill in that gap. Review. Since World War II, Eastern and Western nations have been guarding something so secret, no head of state has known about it, even though their countries honor a pact to maintain the mission dating back almost 80 years. Every 365 days, a single soldier from each hemisphere is sent to an undisclosed location where observation towers are posted on either side of a massive gorge. The two operatives are to have no outside contact. They are not permitted to talk to each other, either. Their assignment is to merely monitor the area and make sure nothing ever crawls its way out of the gorge and onto the surface. But if America and Russia didn't want their respective guardians to communicate, much less form a mutual attraction, they shouldn't have recruited Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy for the operation. With model-like looks to complement their elite sniper skills, they don't make it 2 months before protocol is breached and their characters, Levi and Dresa, begin using written messages and binoculars to build a romantic bond. That's just too much Hollywood hotness to hide in a forest and expect everyone to keep their hands to themselves for 12 months. Tours of duty start in September. October through January isn't a particularly eventful period, other than minor moments of long-distance exchanges like drunkenly dancing on Dresa's birthday and remotely playing chess together. A runtime tipping over 2 hours puts a lot of pressure on two people to carry an entire movie with minimal verbal dialogue. Teller and Taylor-Joy channel ample charm to keep the gorge chugging through the rhythm's valleys, though the gradual build to their relationship can still slow the pulse of both the pace and the viewer. Come February, Levi and Dresa get their first physical interaction courtesy of a zipline that sends Levi across the chasm for an intimate evening with Dresa. However, it doesn't send him back in the morning. Conveniently for the script, but inconveniently for the couple, a sudden landmine explosion snaps Levi's cable, hurtling him into the fog-shrouded canyon below. Dresa immediately parachutes after her new love interest. With the gorge now past its midpoint, action finally ignites in earnest. The film's second half follows Levi and Drace's exploration of a lost world, whose mysteries and monsters are beyond what both of them imagined. They already knew next to nothing about their mission. What they uncover next about who sent them there, why, and what's really down in the depths introduces more questions. Though none are more dire than how Levi and Drace will survive a nightmarish realm from which no human has ever returned. From notable names like Doctor Strange director Scott Derrickson and featured actor Sigourney Weaver, to shooting in various locations spanning the globe, it's obvious it cost millions of dollars to make The Gorge. Yet you can also tell the movie is styled for straight-to-streaming standards rather than as a theatrical studio thriller, in part because you can't always see the money on screen, literally. Although Canada, Norway, England, and Scotland are cited among countries where production took place, it looks like a fair majority of filming occurred in front of a screen, similar to how Disney produces Star Wars TV. End credits list too many artists to count, with individual FX houses numbering over a dozen. The Gorge features several intense sequences, but not so many spectacles that this many modelers, mocappers, and technical engineers would be necessary unless they were adding computer-generated elements to virtually every frame. With this much work being done, it's an odd choice for darkness to diminish so much of it. Above ground, the main monsters, called Hollow Men, from the T.S. Eliot poem, naturally know to only attack after sunset. Story-wise, that might make sense for them to use the cover of night. Visually, that makes less sense for an audience squinting to see creepy creations getting lost in blizzards of animated muzzle flashes and inky shadows. Once Levi and Drace descend into the titular location, even that set gets obscured in thick yellow mist during daytime and thick purple smoke at night. There, the duo battles through Hollow Men on horseback on their way to a spooky building where remaining exposition, previously delivered by secondary characters whose only purpose is to provide information, anxiously awaits discovery. These new details include serendipitous instructions on how to destroy the Gorge, a moment that immediately makes the rest of the movie a waiting game for Chekhov's self-destruct sequence to activate. Since the Gorge finds contentment as a homogenized action-adventure, Formula provides enough economy fuel to hold a steady speed through routine romance, as well as predictable plotting based on boilerplate beats. Just don't get caught waiting for the film to exceed the posted limit in any individual lane. The Gorge is a place where even the world's most resourceful mercenary can still be a distressed damsel in need of heroic rescue. The weird world created for the Gorge has potential for further fiction, although it might work better in a book, where an active imagination can shine brighter lights on the creatures and concepts than the movie's limited lighting and narrowed narrative ever do. A high-concept premise with atmospheric tension. From the very first frame, The Gorge establishes itself as a tense, slow-burn thriller, immersing audiences in a bleak and isolated setting. The film follows Levi Kane, Teller, an American private contractor, and Drace, Taylor-Joy, a Lithuanian sniper working for Russian forces, as they take up positions on opposite sides of a mysterious gorge. Their orders are simple: guard their respective towers and eliminate anything that emerges from the abyss. However, as time passes, curiosity and loneliness bring them together, defying strict protocols and sparking a forbidden romance. But what truly lurks within the Gorge? The film expertly builds suspense as Levi and Drace's relationship develops in the shadow of the unknown, leading to disturbing revelations about the horrors that lie below. Derrickson, best known for his work on Sinister and Doctor Strange, crafts a moody and atmospheric tale that thrives on its slow-burn horror elements. The isolation of the snipers, their increasing paranoia, and the looming dread of what might emerge from the Gorge create an immersive experience. The setting itself, a cold, desolate military outpost overlooking a seemingly endless chasm, acts as an omnipresent threat, amplifying the psychological tension. A balance of horror, action, and romance. One of the Gorge's most striking aspects is how it seamlessly blends multiple genres. The horror elements are undeniably effective, with eerie, nightmarish imagery surrounding the Hollow Men, grotesque creatures born from twisted bioweapon experimentation. These beings, spliced with animal, plant, and insect DNA, evoke a sense of Lovecraftian horror, reinforcing the idea that some things should never be uncovered. At the same time, the film doesn't rely solely on horror. The action sequences are impressively staged, particularly as Levi and Dresa navigate the dangers of the Gorge. Their attempts to escape are filled with nerve-wracking gunfights, desperate chases, and visceral hand-to-hand combat against both human enemies and mutated horrors. Derrickson demonstrates his ability to craft thrilling set pieces, blending practical effects with CGI to create high-intensity action sequences that feel weighty and impactful. Surprisingly, The Gorge also functions as a deeply emotional love story. Levi and Dresa's relationship is given significant depth, as they are forced to confront not just the horrors around them, but also the complexities of their own allegiances and fears. Their dynamic evolves naturally, shifting from wary adversaries to forbidden lovers, and Teller and Taylor-Joy's chemistry ensures that the romance feels compelling rather than forced. Performances that carry the film. Miles Teller delivers a strong performance as Levi, portraying him as a rugged yet vulnerable soldier who masks his personal failures with bravado. He brings a relatable humanity to the role, ensuring that Levi's struggles and decisions feel believable. Teller excels in the film's action sequences, but he also conveys the emotional weight of his character's journey, particularly in his interactions with Dresa. Anya Taylor-Joy continues to prove why she is one of the most captivating actors of her generation. As Dresa, she is enigmatic yet deeply compelling, embodying a soldier who has lived her life in the shadows of war. Taylor-Joy's performance is nuanced, balancing her character's cold, methodical nature with moments of warmth and vulnerability. Her ability to shift between quiet intensity and raw emotion makes Dresa a standout character. Sigourney Weaver, in a supporting role, brings gravitas to the film, playing a mysterious figure tied to the classified history of the Gorge. Though her screen time is limited, her presence adds a layer of authority and intrigue to the story. A story that occasionally overextends itself. While the Gorge excels in many areas, it is not without its flaws. The film's ambitious narrative occasionally struggles with pacing, particularly in the middle act. After an engaging and suspenseful first half, the story loses some of its momentum as it shifts into full-blown action mode. Some of the exposition regarding the Gorge's origins and the involvement of Darklake, a shadowy organization seeking to exploit the horrors within, feels rushed, and the corporate conspiracy subplot, while intriguing, is somewhat underdeveloped. Additionally, the third act leans heavily into spectacle, featuring a large-scale climax that, while thrilling, feels slightly at odds with the film's more intimate and psychological beginnings. The tonal shift from eerie horror to full-fledged action thriller might not sit well with all viewers, especially those expecting a more restrained and ambiguous resolution. Visually striking with effective sound design. Visually, The Gorge is stunning. The cinematography captures the stark beauty of the remote landscape, emphasizing the vast emptiness surrounding Levi and Dresa. The use of light and shadow plays a crucial role in the film's horror sequences, with the Gorge itself remaining a dark and ominous presence. The creature designs are suitably grotesque, blending practical effects with CGI to create nightmarish beings that feel tangible and terrifying. The film's sound design and score are equally effective, heightening the tension with eerie, otherworldly sounds emanating from the Gorge. Composers Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross deliver a haunting score that blends military percussion with unsettling, atmospheric compositions. Overall, despite its occasional missteps, The Gorge remains a gripping and well-crafted entry in the sci-fi horror genre. It successfully combines military thriller elements with cosmic horror, delivering an experience that is both thought-provoking and viscerally intense. The film's strong performances, atmospheric tension, and well-executed action sequences make it an engaging watch, even if its narrative ambitions slightly outpace its execution. For those who appreciate a genre-bending film that blends horror, action, and romance, The Gorge is well worth the watch. It may not redefine the sci-fi horror landscape, but it delivers a memorable and thrilling ride. Once upon a time, a film like The Gorge would have been enshrouded in a marketing mystery as thick as the meteorological fog at its titular location. The "I could tell you what's inside the Gorge, but you'll just have to see for yourself" kind of enticement. While trailers for the film, streaming Friday on Apple TV+, admirably avoid spoilers, They also simply say, here's yet another movie with recognizable actors from theatrical films you loved that you can stream and which Apple TV Plus hopes will break through the glut of the mill and slash or your decision paralysis. The catch is The Gorge is good fun in the same way as screenwriter Zach Dean's The Tomorrow War was good fun in 2021. High-concept sci-fi action with just enough room for actors to move in interesting ways amid all the digitally enhanced chaos. Remember The Tomorrow War? Of course you don't. Watching something is hardly a prerequisite for that anymore amid infinite options. But if only for the 2 hours it uses, The Gorge stretches out some hooky ideas, thematic tension and strong chemistry between Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. Dresa Taylor-Joy is a Lithuanian sniper willing to spend 10 days in a literal hole to wait out her oligarchical target's arrival on an airport tarmac. She's one of the best in the business, but Dresa feels guilty for orphaning children, and her formerly KGB father, William Houston, drops his own heavy bomb on her emotional well-being before she takes a long-term job. Meanwhile, Levi Teller is a Marine retired from active service who regularly wakes in a cold sweat and scrawls poetry in a notebook. When a psychological evaluation reveals his PTSD is escalating, Levi is about to run out of what few freelance military contracting jobs he can find. But then he's summoned to Camp Pendleton by a mysterious muckety-muck, Sigourney Weaver, and dispatched to the Gorge. Where is the Gorge? Who knows? Why does Levi need to serve a year-long tour of duty? Hard to say initially, but the automatic guns, landmines, turret posts, and satellite cloaking technology suggest something sinister. So what's Levi's mission? Stop whatever's in the Gorge from getting out. Alright, so what is the Gorge? You'll just have to see for yours. Okay. One character calls it the door to hell, and the wailing inside comes from what he refers to as the Hollow Men. Good thing Levi took that community college poetry course to understand that reference. Levi is to occupy the West Clock Tower, replenishing any munitions that may expire or explode. Under no circumstance is he to contact his counterpart in the East Clock Tower, which just so happens to be Dresa. A couple of months pass with rules followed and zero spooky activity, but Dresa catches Levi's attention one night, so she doesn't have to celebrate her birthday alone. So begins a long-distance relationship built on camaraderie, chess, and eventual courtship. Teller and Taylor-Joy seem initially ill-fitted to the Gorge's mopey and morose setup, but they and the film leap to life once Dresa blasts Blitzkrieg Bop to bridge the gap. And after Levi takes inspiration from a different T.S. Eliot reference months later, it's not long before Levi and Dresa generate steam heat themselves. The way they longingly look at each other feels both like a biological imperative after a long dry spell, and perhaps the first time anybody has dared to peer past the parameters of the military or mercenary services they offer. The interlude indicates director Scott Derrickson, The Black Phone and Doctor Strange could perhaps someday thrive in more of a straight-up romantic drama. But because this is the Gorge, you simply must believe one would heedlessly leap into the unknown after the other when something goes wrong. While the reveal of what's really happening down in the Gorge is intriguing, it's rarely as engaging as watching Levi and Dresa effortlessly connect in ways neither believed possible. However, there's just enough esoteric and eldritch detail to what these soldiers find and in ways that briefly call to mind the cockeyed curiosity of vintage Terry Gilliam or Guillermo del Toro's specialty in anthropological ick. Again, without spoiling, the Gorge introduces biologically unsettling specificity to both the Hollow Men and other things skittering down there in ways that transcend their clearly digital realization. It's enhanced by a Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score that shifts from their usual piano murk into what feels like an audible plucking, stretching, and tearing of DNA. Although Derrickson's approach to the action beats take on a bit too much of a tactician quality, Dean's script plays up the discouraging direction of our military-industrial complex toward a conflation of old guard secrecy and private equity greed. And albeit to a lesser degree than the Tomorrow War, there is something worthwhile here about how merciless mechanics of military guilt are grafted onto the bones of generations more desperate and hopeless than the previous one. Come 2029, you may not remember watching The Gorge, but it's worth taking the leap. A preternatural mist hangs over the titular Gorge, and on either side are two heavily armed towers manned by one soldier. Their mission isn't to prevent anyone from going down there, but to stop whatever lurks down there from coming to the surface. What exactly is down there? A gateway to hell, intones one of the soldiers, In charge of keeping watch of the West Tower for a year is Levi Kane, Miles Teller, a sniper with no family connections, and thus no one to ask questions should he disappear on the secret mission. He suffers from nightmares on account of the many lives he's taken over the course of his military career, and in his spare time he reads a lot and writes his own poetry. In the East Tower, there's the Lithuanian Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy, a sniper who also feels remorseful for her many kills. She, at least, has her father, William Houston, who helps in carrying her burdens, until he tells her that the cancer he's been battling has metastasized throughout his body and that he plans to end his life come Valentine's Day. He won't be there for her when she returns from her mission at the Gorge. Dresa and Levi have never met prior to the mission. While they are forbidden to speak to each other during their time there, Dresa decides to break that rule on the night of her birthday. They watch each other via binoculars and write messages to each other on large pads of paper. A relationship soon develops, and the two of them connect by showing off their sniping skills, playing chess, and celebrating Christmas together. They each make a snowman with a sign wishing the other a Merry Christmas. Is actually in these earlier moments where The Gorge is at its best. The mystery established by screenwriter Zach Dean and director Scott Derrickson is intriguing, but the primary focus is more on these two troubled souls and the relationship that forms between them. It might seem strange to describe a romance between two trained killers as endearing, but Joy and Teller are so likable and charming that we don't mind that we've almost forgotten about the evil that lurks within the gorge that separates them. Levi makes the decision to visit Dresa on her side by making a makeshift grappling gun. It's a neat idea, but it's one that we can see going wrong very easily, given the numerous mines that hang on either side of the chasm. It's no surprise to say that it does. After they spend a romantic night together, one of the creatures sets off a mine on Levi's side, causing his line to snap and sending him into the gorge. Dresa arms herself, puts on a parachute, and jumps in there to save him. It was almost inevitable that the both of them would find themselves in there. And there's good news and bad news about this turn of events. The good news is that director Scott Derrickson brings a bewitching sense of style in creating the hellscape below. There are twisted trees that look as though they are formed from human remains, and cinematographer Dan Lawson bathes this nightmarish hellscape in a stark array of red, blue, and brownish-yellow colors. One of the best shots in the film shows our protagonists in an eerie forest where one side of the frame is yellow, while the other side is blue. What happens down there is always a pleasure to look at. The bad news is that it's not that scary or interesting. For starters, the creature design is pretty hokey, and the CGI used to bring them to life is pretty bad. While there are a few giant spiders they find in a dilapidated church, the bulk of the creatures look like demonic ents from The Lord of the Rings. They ride around on zombie horses and drag our heroes through the forest with a lasso, but they go down pretty easily with good old-fashioned machine gun fire. For a place that's said to have killed thousands of soldiers, the threat in the gorge seems curiously unconvincing, but we can expect Levi and Dresa to survive where thousands have died because, love conquers all and all that. I do like the cast. Secondly, there's a lot of exposition about the gorge when it was discovered and the sinister government dealings that happen down there. I will refrain from saying what it all entails, but it's something that we've seen in many other films. Soon enough, the characters who engaged us in the first half of the story take a back seat to the routine plotting and non-stop action. At the start, it seemed as though the movie was going to be about something. Once we get to uncovering the mystery of the gorge, it becomes an exercise in cliches. That's a shame, because I really enjoyed the film when it stayed focused on the characters. Even a hammy performance from Sigourney Weaver as the shady government spook who hires Levi wasn't enough to take me out of the film. It soon becomes clear that while the filmmakers have some compelling ideas, they didn't really have a worthwhile destination. That's not to say that this is a bad film, just a disappointing one. If this were in theaters, I would say wait until it hits streaming. Since it's already there, and if you have any interest in seeing it, it's not the worst way to spend a couple of hours. It certainly leaps and bounds better than Lee Hwanell's Awful Wolfman from earlier this year. The Gorge is the ultimate mashup film. Science fiction, romance, war, and horror are all bottled into one package. What The Gorge does best is character building. Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller have real star power and great chemistry. The action sequences rock, with outstanding choreography and impressive production values. The monsters, though, are a mixed bag and are window-dressing MacGuffins to the main event, romance. Scott Derrickson has learned much from his Marvel production days about crafting a multi-layered thrill package for a broad audience. The Gorge takes a simple premise of two people, separated by an impassable expanse, who fall in love. It drives home the metaphor with a literal canyon between the two protagonists and fills that canyon with vengeful mutants. The unsavory profession of sniper assassins breaks these two snipers, but their means to salvation are through each other. If only they can find a way to cross that divide. Cue the violins. The cast of The Gorge. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Dresa, a Lithuanian sniper who does wet work for the KGB. She is a second-generation assassin who goes nights without sleeping. Miles Teller plays Levi, an American mercenary with hundreds of scalps to his credit. He is alone, burdened by his work, and devoid of attachments. Sigourney Weaver plays Bartholomew, Levi's mysterious spook director of operations, who gives Levi this secret mission. William Houston plays Ericus, Drace's father, who takes on the emotional burden of Drace's kills so that she doesn't have to live with the torment. He is dying of cancer and has planned his own demise for Valentine's Day, while Dresa is on assignment. Soap Derisu plays JD, a British soldier whose time at the Gorge post has concluded. He must now pass on his knowledge of the shift change to Levi. A short synopsis. We are introduced to Dresa as she successfully eliminates a Belarusian arms tycoon, establishing her deadly skill. Returning from her assignment, he visits her father at her mother's grave to hand over the rifle shell denoting a kill. Ericus claims the shell is a symbolic transaction of the burden of guilt for killing another person. The pouch he has is full of her spent shells. Across the globe, Bartholomew summons Levi to a mission. It is not wet work, but it will require someone with his deadly sniping skill. His resume is adorned with difficult assignment trophies, and a remote one-year assignment will not be an issue because he isn't leaving anyone at home who will miss him. Both Dresa and Levi arrive on opposite sides of a fog-shrouded ravine. JD is glad to see Levi, as his one-year rotation is now over. The guard posts on both sides of the canyon are heavily armed with automated defense systems designed to keep whatever is in that gorge from coming out. JD informs Levi that he believes that they are guarding a portal to hell, and then makes off for his return flight home. Make sure nothing gets out of that gorge, and do not make contact with the tower on the other side. Dresa gets the same instructions. But while Levi is a more by-the-book soldier and will not easily break the rules, Dresa is a free spirit and breaks protocol. After months of staring at each other, she draws Levi's attention with handwritten flashcards. The two of them get to know each other through written signs and by using their binoculars. When one of their exchanges gets interrupted by the emergence of mutants scaling the cliffs, a massive firefight erupts as the two soldiers pummel the canyon walls with precision fire. The trust is now solidified, and they become enamored with each other. Levi concocts a means to zipline across to visit the other side of the ravine. Their months of courtship by flashcard culminate with a dinner date of rabbit stew and dancing the night away. When Levi zips back to his side of the watch, something emerges out of the gloom to cut his zipline. His parachute pops open, and he disappears into the fog. Dresa plunges into the canyon after him, and they discover the horrible secrets of the decades-old secret below. Evaluation of the Gorge. The most important part of this movie is that the romance works splendidly. The movie pitches itself first and foremost as a love story, told through action and horror moments. The story takes its time to build the chemistry and the camaraderie, and when the two snipers finally meet face to face, it feels earned and natural. There are some lovely comic bits as well. Scott Derrickson and Zach Dean were gifted with two hugely talented actors in their primes, and in perhaps the least consequential but most endearing moment in the movie, they paid tribute to the highlights of their careers. As they court each other across the chasm, they play chess, in a nod to Taylor-Joy's Emmy-nominated Beth Harmon in The Queen's Gambit, and pound away on makeshift drum kits made of pots and buckets, a nod to Teller's role in the Oscar-nominated Whiplash. Both performers oozed charisma and were solid with both the romantic and action work. The action set pieces for The Gorge thrilled me. The aforementioned gorge firefight, the plunge into the canyon, the harrowing climb out of the canyon, and weaving their way through what has to be described as a membrane network of dead soldiers pulsed with comic book movie bravado. As entertaining as the movie is, what didn't work so well was the science fiction backstory. For a movie that got all the details right about courtship, it struggled to produce a convincing rationale for the mystery in the gorge. It felt like an afterthought, and it overplayed its hand with the supernatural aspects. Once they descended into the gorge, there was an ever-changing color palette. The sharp-eyed snipers should have noticed radically shifting primary color hues in the clouds below. Curious. The post-World War II foundation was littered with logic gaps. The romance emerges as a just-right medium rare. The action sequences are spicy. However, the science fiction is undercooked, leaving it a little raw around the edges. It feels as if they reached the end of the writing process and tried to figure out why something was at the bottom of the gorge. Conclusion. This is a great date night movie. There's a little bit for everybody. The acting performances are charming, and Anya Taylor-Joy continues her ascent past Kate Beckinsale and Mila Jovovich to receive the crown of the best pretty/skinny action heroine on the market. Miles Teller continues his reemergence as a leading man following the disappointment of the Fantastic Four flop. Apple Plus knows they have a winner on their hands. It is currently the first big splash page when you open their application. You cannot miss it. This PG-13 movie executes interpersonal storytelling far better than most big-budget blockbusters, but it has the feel of a superhero action film. To extend my previous food metaphor, The Gorge resembles a bag of Jelly Bellis. It has lots of sweetness and is mostly satisfying, with a few licorice-flavored ones that throw you off a bit but not enough to discourage you from eating more. I think I'm in a post-Valentine's Day sugar-high cumtown. For those of you who want more sweetness in their horror movies, I created a dead list for horror romances and snuck this movie in at the last moment. The Gorge Review. The Gorge, 2025, Film Review. A movie directed by Scott Derrickson, written by Zach Dean, and starring Miles Teller, Anya Taylor-Joy, Sigourney Weaver, Soap Derisu, William Houston, Kobna Holdbrook-Smith, and James Marlowe. At first glance, The Gorge looks to deliver a perfectly edible 2 hours of mind-numbing science fiction horror. The plot is simple, the idea is fun, and the cast, on paper, should be able to deliver. But when the picture started and the very first credits began to roll, my modest aspirations burned away into a modern-day cynicism that clouds the film industry like stale cigar smoke. The Gorge is ground zero, exhibit A, and all the other stupid euphemisms to describe exactly what is wrong with the current state of film. But before any corporate takedown, a plot synopsis is needed. The film follows two highly trained and highly mysterious military assassins, Levi, Miles Teller, and Dresa, Anya Taylor-Joy with a brutal Eastern European accent, from opposite sides of the world. The kinds of military mercenaries even the government is hesitant to call on. Their new mission is to hold up in a sniper tower for the next 12 months and guard the gorge. A foggy, spooky rift in the world that is described by the exiting watchman as a gateway to hell. With Levi on one side, of course the American is named Levi, and Dresa on the other, it is only a matter of time before a heartfelt connection is made between the two killers. Oh, and we can't forget about Sigourney Weaver, who plays the high-ranking official that sends Levi to the gorge. She does her best with the material she is given, but I cannot say that for the rest of the cast, crew, or producing team. I won't spoil the film, but let's just say it plays out exactly how you think it's going to. Right down to the corny montages with music that doesn't fit. The screenplay was written by Zach Dean, who may be feeling too comfortable in this genre to bring anything new to the table. With past titles like 24 Hours to Live, Fast X, and The Tomorrow War, The Gorge should be a layup for him, but instead we're given stock characters and cringeworthy dialogue. And that brings me to the crux of my issue when viewing the film. Did anyone care? It's safe to say the production team behind it didn't. An Apple Plus original film in conjunction with Skydance Media is about as corporate a team to fund a film as you will ever see. They could smell the tax write-offs a mile away. It's hard to fathom the money Apple bleeds on a monthly basis through their overwhelmingly subpar streaming service, and Skydance Media is billionaire David Ellison's toy to play with. Remember, Skydance was the team in talks to buy one of the last storied Hollywood studios in town, Paramount Pictures. If all this sounds like late-stage capitalist cynicism, then I'm glad you're listening. Because it's what is happening behind the scenes that causes capable filmmakers like Derrickson to deliver this washed-out junk. It's hard not to get aggravated as a viewer when you know the team making the film doesn't care about you. Quality and artistry aren't even in the back seat. They are gagged and stuffed in the trunk of the car as it speeds off a cliff toward their bottom lines. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are highly miscast and share about as much chemistry as two actors in a car commercial. Not that it matters, of course. They are household names with pretty faces. We just want to see them fall in love. Even Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross phoned in their work on the film. Quite possibly the most reliable working composers in Hollywood today dug up and churned out whatever was left on the Gone Girl cutting room floor for a score as forgettable as the film itself. While The Gorge is a watchable enough movie, when you begin to peel back the layers that rot beneath the silver screen, it falls apart, and you're left with another 7-day free trial you have to remember to cancel before being charged. Rating 3 out of 10. Leave your thoughts on this The Gorge review and the film below in the comments section. Readers seeking to support this type of content can visit our Patreon page and become one of Filmbook's patrons. Readers seeking more film reviews can visit our movie review page, our movie review Twitter page, and our movie review Facebook page. Want up-to-the-minute notifications? Filmbook staff members publish articles by email, mobile app, Google News, Feedly, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, Pinterest, Reddit, Telegram, Mastodon, Flipboard, and Threads.